there is a stranger before you. As if looking through a haze, you can barely discern the outline of the stranger's form, and you're filled with questions. Is the stranger tall? What clothes does the stranger wear? Why is he here? Is there danger? You walk. A few steps forward, and you begin to see the stranger more clearly. You can see that the stranger has something to tell you. The stranger beckons you forward. A voice so familiar calls out, but you don't recognize the words. Perhaps they're too far removed. Perhaps they're lost somewhere in the fog. There is nothing else but to move forward, and forward, step after step after laboring step. Once you see the stranger's face, you understand. The words are clear now. You turn and beckon and call out behind you. Beware. They say, at the rate our cells die and replace themselves, we are physically an entire new person every 7 years. But what of our minds? What of our memories? How many years does it take for us to turn into someone we don't know? Someone we wouldn't recognize? How long does it take to create a stranger? Welcome to episode 7 of Not Now, Not Here. In this week's episode, there are places where time is thinner than usual. With the right eyes, we can look forward, beyond the cardinal directions, straight into time itself. A young man named Howard has just found one such place. But what will he find there? What will he see through dream-filled eyes? What will he recognize in the face of a stranger? So turn down the lights, close your windows and doors, and sit back. Prepare to enter a world that is not now, not here. The bench. There was a particular bench in the woods, plain, unassuming, worn down from years of children and picnics and rain. No one ever came there on purpose. The bench was only discovered by accident, and the ones who first built it had gone far away. The old boards were soft and comfortable now, but more than the boards had been worn down there in the woods. Time was worn down too, worn thin. The bench was square, about 10 feet across, and about 2 feet off the ground, like a big, short table. If you discovered it there at the edge of the trees, you would think it was quite curious. But then you would realize that this was an excellent place to stop and have a nap. There was shade from the nearby maple trees, and a soft breeze came up off the fields, pushing you to sit, relax, and take in the countryside. When you did sit down, you would be compelled to lean all the way back and rest your head on your arms and look up through the waving branches. The sky beyond was not usual sky. Threads of thought would weave their way up through the leaves and catch things that would normally be out of reach. Concerns didn't melt away, but you understood how trivial they were. This wasn't an effect of the soft wood or the softer wind, but had more to do with the way time had been sanded down. There, in that spot, your past, present, and future were not separated by the usual distances. Instead, they mingled. Today, now, Howard Banks is lying on the bench. His left leg dangles off the edge. The toe of his sneaker brushes the grass. With one hand, he twirls a stick in his fingers. Howard Banks is a young man on a walk. When he spots the bench, all he thinks of is a nap. A part of him realizes that he spends far too much time thinking about girls and grades, and not enough time simply being outdoors. Why has he never done this before? Why has his mind been drawn to dances and cars and curls of hair that drift across girls' shoulders? Isn't this enough? This quiet peace? This deserted bit of countryside? It should be. It should be. A single drop of water falls onto Howard's face. He thinks nothing of it, though perhaps he should. The water doesn't come from the trees or an errant cloud. That particular drop comes from a faraway place Howard can see through his half-open eyes. He could be on the verge of sleep, but still awake, still aware. Like a daydream, but more vivid than any other daydream he's experienced in his young life. He can see himself on an old bus, sitting next to an open window. The bus is crowded, and the air is tropical as it streams in, tussling his hair. The clouds on the horizon are unlike any he has ever seen. Mist from the ocean and from the approaching storm graze his skin, and he's aware that the skin feels different around his eyes and beneath his chin. He rubs his face. His skin has an odd, leathery quality. He has two faces now. One is young and looks up through the branches next to the bench. The other is aged, with wrinkles showing around his eyes and mouth. How strange. But of course, he realizes, he's always had many faces. There is nothing more natural. On the bus, in the seat in front of Howard, a little boy peers at him. The boy is lithe and tanned, and his hair has been bleached by the sun. Howard knows that the boy has been waiting to speak to him for some time, working up the courage, and when he finally does, he almost shouts, "Do you swim?" "Yes, I do," Howard says back. At the sound of Howard's voice, the boy drops down out of view. Howard can hear the boy breathing nervously, and it makes him smile. The bus stops next to a gate, and several men in suits get off. Behind the gate there are houses on stilts near the beach, palm trees, and a few cars. The men are businessmen, coming home from work in the city. Howard has been in the city, he knows, but not on business. He is dressed in a soft white button shirt, cargo shorts, and flip-flops. He watches the men with relaxed detachment. As they filter in through the gate and into their homes, Howard knows that the few people left on the bus are either poor or they're tourists heading down to the hostels and beaches and bars. The boy is still with him, peeking again. "I can swim to that island," the boy says quickly, pointing through the trees to a blotch of green out in the sea. "I swim there every day. Do you believe me? That's pretty far, Howard says. The boy disappears behind the seat as the bus starts to rumble forward again. The bus is nearly empty now, and Howard stretches deeply, kicking his legs into the aisle. It's been so long, he thinks. But he is happy here. Happier than he's been in some time. In this, the part of Howard that rests on the bench and the part of Howard that rides the bus are in complete agreement. The happiness reaches through time like a tree branch waving in the wind. The rain starts before the bus comes to the last stop. Sheets of rain, falling heavy and straight, even though the wind is rising. Howard gets off the bus and buys an umbrella from a man with a cart. He starts to walk along a crowded beachfront path of carved stone. His feet are wet in his sandals. The umbrella is too small, and he struggles to keep it between himself and the thick drops. The boy from the bus races in front of him. No umbrella, no sandals, jumping into puddles and laughing. He looks back at Howard for a moment. The boy is missing a tooth, Howard sees, and he's soaked through. His laughter is louder than the crashing sea. It is natural, laughing here. Howard doesn't reach his room. It's too far up the beach to walk in this kind of rain. He passes a corner cafe. Usually crowded and wide open, the cafe is now hidden behind a sheet of water spilling from the roof off the awning spread over the tables and chairs. He can make out figures sitting at the tables on the other side of the waterfall. Inspired by the boy, he dashes through. His umbrella catches the brunt of the water, but the legs of his shorts and his sandals are drenched. Inside, the dozen or so tables are filled with tourists. They all wear swimsuits or bikinis and dresses. The storm has not fazed them. This is why cafes and awnings were created, after all, and a fruity drink tastes even better when one is besieged by a tropical storm. The tourists are loud and persistently at each other in a way only tourists can be. Howard finds an empty table and orders himself a bottle of white wine. Nearby, a European couple is having a conversation about hot water. I don't think it's a necessity, the man says. He's young, Howard thinks. As young as I am. As part of me is. It's so embarrassing, the fuss all these people make about hot water. Cold water is just fine. The man eyes the other tourists. And it's a waste of energy, the woman says, agreeing. The woman looks as if she hasn't showered in days. Her long brown hair is damp from the rain, but there's salt in it too from the ocean. Days' worth. Both of them have tattoos and bracelets that the locals sell in little shops down the road. Their skin is deeply tanned. They sit in their plastic chairs as if they'd fallen from the clouds and just happened to have ended up here, in this spot. There's a small bottle of local rum on the table. The torrent of rain flowing off the awning makes the cafe seem as if it has walls. The man is nodding. Think of all the better things they could do with that energy. Hospitals. Industry. But instead, they're using energy so all of us can take a nice, comfortable shower. The man drinks. It's disgusting. They're mixing their rum and seem more than pleased with the crowded cafe. They don't enjoy talking to each other half as much as they enjoy having others there to hear them. Talk to them, Howard thinks. It's young Howard, the Howard on the bench who thinks it. Talk to them to find out if it's real. He knows, as surely as he's ever known anything, that he's supposed to talk to them. There's something he's supposed to say. I like hot showers, Howard says. They're a mark of culture. They show advancement and refinement. The couple turn to him. Of course they do. We don't need them, the young man says. He's talking louder, trying to impress the girl, and doesn't seem at all surprised that Howard has suddenly joined their conversation. It's better to get back to basics, to live a simple life. No hot water, no washing machines, no movie theaters, no MP3 players. Yes, says the girl, a simple life. For the first time in his existence, Howard sees contempt in a stranger's eyes. You're too old, her eyes say. Too old and set in your ways. You wouldn't understand. Too old? He isn't even 18 yet. Or, at least, part of him isn't. But that isn't the part who responds. I agree, he says, smiling. A simple life, free of such trivialities as rum, jewelry, fashion, and tattoo parlors. The young man scowls at him. The young woman scoffs. What would you know about it, she says, turning away. A local waitress brings a bottle of lukewarm white wine, swinging it unceremoniously. She also brings a corkscrew and a large glass with a thick bottom. Howard pours himself a drink. Simplicity, he toasts toward the young man and woman. As he swallows, a strange, dissonant thought cuts through his mind. A part of him is refreshed, loving the smooth, fruity taste of the wine. Another part of him squirms with his eyes shut, balking at the odd, too sweet flavor of the cheap wine. It's this thought that brings him back to the bench, back to the countryside. He's never had white wine, but in the way people can be certain of things in dreams, Howard can see himself looking through the rain, down the stone path by the beach, and he becomes certain. The storm will blow itself out in the night, and in the morning, the police will find the body. Howard would recognize the boy's corpse, bloated and beaten by the surf and the rocky shore. The boy's eyes, swollen shut, his lips engorged and cracked like mud drying in the sun. Seaweed hanging from his swollen sausage fingers. Blood and sand drying in his hair and matting it like paper. I can swim to that island. I swim there every day. Howard remembers the sound of the boy's voice, the sound of his laughter. It floats away, drifting out of his mind. People would talk about it at the cafe. The loss would ripple through the crowd of tourists like another storm. The young man and young woman, with their dirty clothes and bracelets, would discuss it with great conviction when there were people there to hear them. And all through it, everyone would wonder why there was no one who could help him. Where were his parents? Who was looking out for him? Howard stood up from the bench with a strange taste of wine in his mouth. How odd, he said. How long had he been asleep? A sense of loss clung to Howard like a wet shirt as he walked back into town and stayed with him for the rest of the day. But he was dry by the time the sun set. There were people to meet, after all, and plenty of things to occupy his time. That brings us to the end of this week's episode. We hope you found it as curious to hear as we found it to make. Be sure to tune in next week for another dreary installment. This week's episode features music by Kevin MacLeod. The songs Spacial Winds and On the Shore are used under the Creative Commons license and can be found at incompetech.com. There's a lot of great music there, and you should all go have a listen. You can also visit notnownothere.com for more information about the music, including legal information and links to all the songs you've just heard. Other music was provided by jewelbeat.com, which is a great source for background music and scores. They've got a tremendous selection and are also wonderful if you need music for any projects you are working on. The various atmospheres you heard on this week's episode were created using ambientmixer.com. That's ambient-mixer.com. For a list of all the sounds used and information about the Creative Commons license, please visit notnownothere.com. This podcast is written and performed by Phillip Kohtz. If you like any of the stories that you hear on the show, you can read them or download them for free online. You can find all of the stories published in a variety of digital formats, corresponding artwork, poetry, our blog, and also news about future releases at notnownothere.com. You can also find us on Twitter, and probably other places. If you like what we're doing, please spread the word, and be sure to stop by our site and give us your feedback. We'd love to hear your thoughts, opinions, criticisms, and ideas. Until next week, kind listeners, it's time to return to the now and the here. May the winds be ever at your back.